want to do what we did sort of in an earlier panel and sort of cut to the chase. We want to use the time the best way we can. And I've asked each panelist to take probably 4 to 5 minutes or so to kind of pose the key points that they want to make. If that works, we might have some time for some backing and forthing here, which I think is a lot more fun for us and you. So in kind of starting things off, I'm also going to ask them to maybe roll in 30 seconds to a minute in terms of putting their own work and what they do in context. Ashley, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, so I'm Ashley. I focus on the implementation of blockchain projects, and we're based out of London. And we do work across the world, because right now, just like AI, blockchain is a bit of a buzzword, so everyone's quite interested in it. And I think a key thing to focus on is the practical and effective applications of these technologies, and not to get swept up in all the hype. So we work on a bunch of projects around the world. Some of the most interesting and relevant ones that we work on are around the use of AI and IoT, so actually enabling these AI machines to start gathering all the data that they need to operate, but doing that in a way that doesn't actually infringe upon people's privacy or actually start impinge upon the security of various networks. So the way we generally work with companies is that we go in and actually find out what their problems are, and then assess if blockchain is an effective solution, and then we partner with them actually to develop the most effective solution. And then usually kind of more long-term partnerships, and that really gives us the ability to maybe a bit of a critical friend, and not always give them just the solution or the answer that they want, but maybe the answer and the solution that is actually needed. And I do think this kind of approach is imperative when we're talking about these hype words, and everyone can kind of get swept up and think it's going to change the world tomorrow, when actually, there's a few more boring steps we need to take before we can start making these big changes.
Aleksandra, just before I go, kind of push you a little bit just while you're there, and without divulging what you shouldn't divulge. You kind of talk about sort of long-term and solutions. Can you kind of coach some of those in an example?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll talk about the things we're doing around IoT. So this is essentially using blockchain to provide a security layer, so that you can actually give all your devices in an IoT Internet of Things network, you can give them an identity that can't be taken away from them. Because classically, everyone says, the S in IoT stands for security. And actually, IoT doesn't stand for Internet of Things, it stands for Internet of Targets. So classically, it's been quite dangerous to just connect things onto the network and let them run with it. So with blockchain, we enable these items to actually have an identity. So if they start acting maliciously or doing a denial of service attack somewhere, then you can quite quickly cut them out. So the second thing of how this relates to AI is that once we've got their identity and they start creating data, then we can actually choose a provider to acquire that data off the user. And so they can do that in a time-fashioned way. So they can actually get the cryptographic keys to decrypt the data, and they can run any kind of analysis on it that they want. But then all these contracts, they do have a close point where actually they no longer have the data. And this data isn't stored on their servers or their databases. It's always stored with the user. And so there's no kind of legal or liability risk around that data getting leaked or falling into the wrong hands.
Thanks.
Hi, my name is Aleksandra Przegalińska. I'm originally Polish. I now work at Kosny University here in Warsaw, in Poland, and I also work at MIT at the Center for Collective Intelligence. And the stuff that I mainly work with is human-machine interaction. And by that, I mean that we run various kinds of experiments that use psychophysiological data. So we harvest that data with sensors. We're using IoT infrastructure for that, to kind of check how people feel when they interact with machines. So we really want to see where kind of this whole AI revolution is taking us. It seems like, there are many chatbots, bots, social robots, humanoid robots like Sophia on the market now. And the question is, how are we going to use them? And also, how are we going to make sure that we feel safe and comfortable using them? So the experiments that we're working on are trying to address these issues somehow and answer the questions how a perfect chatbot should actually be constructed, both on the side of, the kind of machine learning that you use there, but also on the side of, really the layer of interaction, right? What it says, how it says what it says. Should it be context aware? Should it be more responsive, for instance, to your mood? Would you like that in the future? Or would you rather kind of feel threatened by the fact that something like this is harvesting your emotional data? So essentially, I could say that we work somewhere at the intersection of real AI, applied AI, and AI ethics, too, to kind of understand how, how we could look at the trajectories of AI development in the future, the consumer AI, I mean.
Are you are you developing the methodology, or have you got any sense of what you think you'll find, or have you done enough to find that you can hint with 500 of your best friends here that will promise not to take it anywhere else?
Yeah, well, I think the methodology is sort of ready, so we have our own sort of magic sauce,
sure,
right, that is related to how to really harvest and clean the kind of data that we're using. So the methodology has shown us something that I think was mentioned here already, that's the so-called uncanny valley effect, which means whenever a technology is super humanoid, it can actually create fear in humans, can create an outcome that you don't want, really. So these people will interact with that technology less than they would otherwise, right? So if the technology is just simple to define and you know that you can categorize it as a technology, it will be easier for you to actually, have that interaction. Whereas when it's a super humanoid machine, it requires, well, I would say a lot of courage to really go deep into that kind of interaction. So this is something we've uncovered already and confirmed with our research, and we're currently working on a software that would allow you to detect whether you're talking to a chatbot or a human online. So this is the stuff that we're working on at this moment. It's really more applied, and we are hoping to be kind of ready with that by the end of the year.
It's interesting. It sort of feels like a lot of things. It starts to go full circle. When I hear you say what you did at the end, it's like, yep, you know what? They're coming back to the illiterates like me, because they have to kind of make it such that I will, in fact, move forward. You got to go forward and backwards to kind of start moving forward. Microsoft.
Hello, yeah, Microsoft, Przemek Szuder. I serve on the board of the Microsoft in Poland. I'm responsible for the partner ecosystem with the particular focus on AI. And let me start by saying I'm not a particular fan of the term. I think it's first too large and brings too many connotations relating to science fiction movies, whereas the reality is that, as we discussed before the panel, majority of the projects that we call AI are based on machine learning algorithms, yeah, right? And I think it's good, because I agree it's a safe type of technology where the privacy or feelings and ethical concerns are probably not that much visible. But also the way we look at AI outside of the machine learning, there are two important other components. One is everything that is related to the cognitive services, so translating physical world into data, understanding speech, understanding image, understanding video, and following. And finally, the most sophisticated today, which is interacting with humans, right? What people may not realize, we have a really thriving ecosystem in Poland, not that visible to public at the moment, because for some reason, the ecosystem is mostly specializing in the very advanced B2B solutions with fairly limited broad market visibility, because they serve some of the large customers globally, and not that much is happening in the consumer services space. But a lot is going on, and probably right now we are working with at least 100 Polish AI-based companies at the moment.
Okay. Let me push. Do you three, I'll say, types, and I'm being a bit unfair, do you three, in terms of owning the expertise that you do you talk to each other? And I don't mean as individuals. I'm sure that you talk vertically within the silos that you're in, but kind of looking at impact, and I'll call it the softer, maybe unfairly, side with the harder side. Is there conversation that goes horizontally very much, or does it happen? And I throw that open to
So
all,
I think
all three of
let
you.
me start. I think there is, but it's kind of project by project, right? Because like we as a global vendor, we are delivering certain building blocks to build the solution. Then there are the companies like yours that are taking this, combining this with the business model, and really building an application that somebody wants to use because sees value. But in the process of building that, especially data science piece is so important that we are frequently in the need of using academics to really help us design the models and design the applications in a way that they are most effective. That's one. And secondly, that there is the learning component of the application. Because, you know, like the first grade student can design an algorithm, but a deep learning algorithm is a different type of knowledge.
I could say, well, something from my own expertise. So I myself, I'm trained as a philosopher, then turned data scientist, and we are working as a very interdisciplinary team. We have neuropsychologists, data scientists, coders, philosophers, classical psychologists on a team. But very often when we apply for grants and we try to explain what we're doing, and this intersection is very visible, we get rejected because they tell us that we are not easy to categorize, right? So obviously I'm not going to brag about how bad it is because it's not bad, but on the other hand, I do see that there is a problem in classification of what people are doing. So I think it should be natural that teams are interdisciplinary and kind of require different types of expertise. But at least in science, and I'm not only talking about Poland, but generally, you have all those old school categories. So this is psychology, this is physiology, and this is, let's say, computer science. Where are you? We are in the field of human-machine interaction, which means we are in all of these fields together. So I can say that we're really trying to have that dialogue, and obviously, you know, I think it goes really well, and we use each other's expertise. But then on the other hand, there are obstacles on the way, and they're very, I would say, well, important obstacles, because it seems like the fact that we work together is not encouraged by some institutions that are still sticking to certain things that don't fit this new landscape.
Okay. Actually, and I'm just going to throw in, and going back to the first, is practice, is the reality of I call it implementation, leading, and pushing the development of sort of values and approaches. You know, who's driving the bus? Who's leading? Actually, go ahead.
I'd say right now with these technologies, because they are quite advanced, it seems like actually the research is really leading the way, and then people like us come in and, you know, desperately try to commercialize it. Having said that, you know, we are developing in-house. And various governments really support you in doing that with, you know, grants if you're doing R&D. And I would say usually that kind of research is most effective when it's done with at least some kind of touch point to the actual market. Because it's all very well and good, you know, creating something that is incredibly impressive, but if no one actually wants to use it, then there's not much use.
I sort of remember, I call it a generation earlier than mine. My dad was an engineer, and he would always say, I'm a really good engineer. The problem is people. Yeah. and I say that, I loved him dearly, and it's not a bad, but it was sort of, in a bit, this engineering, he could solve problems. He was a good, I wish I had that, a good linear thinker. That was fabulous. So God, I wish I could do that. And sort of part of that, however, was that as things non-engineering wise started to push in, which they increasingly did, it became less of kind of the technological or the technical skill set and more of the management of all of the different elements that then, of course, required a much more cross-disciplinary perspective.
Absolutely. It's actually something that came up very quickly in our conversations backstage.
Okay.
You know, the technology is there in terms of blockchain and AI, but the hard part is bringing people with you and bringing these companies with you, particularly when, you know, a whole department may be on your side, but you have to get sign-off from a CFO who knows nothing about AI and blockchain, and you're going in there explaining the world, and the kind of head explodes, and then you've got to get them to sign a check.
Okay, obvious question for me in the comfort of this room is, why is it so hard? I mean, I know that's sort of a dumb question, but we all live within our own kind of places. Why, like, it seems so obvious, the three of you are sitting here. Why is it hard to kind of get that?
Well, I think it's very similar example on the commercial side of the implementation to what you experience on the research side, yeah? Because like the underlying nature of the AI project means bringing the interdisciplinary team to the same extent on the customer side. And people are simply looking at the typical specialization, functions, you know, marking their own, protecting their own territory, because it is to a certain degree an unknown that they are bringing. And people are people. They are trying to protect and act within what they know, and really not that much open to an innovation. And I think a lot of the innovative project, the technology component is fairly straightforward today. It's managing people and the emotions, which really hinders the progress.
So how do you start to get at that? I mean, where do you...
Yeah, well, it's hard, and I don't think that popular culture is making that any easier, producing movies how the Terminator gonna kills you, you know, and all ends in a dystopian reality. So I think the AI people are really fed up with that somehow, because it does not translate into our work anyhow. But on the other hand, I would say, like, on a positive note, this is the year of AI ethics, artificial intelligence ethics. Everybody's discussing all those cross-disciplinary interdependencies, you know. So artificial intelligence now is a public project in many ways, right? It's a project of public interest, and governments and various other, you know, groups of interest have to address it somehow. So what I think is that even though it's quite hard to bring everybody on board, at least now we can see the effort to do so, because for a very long time, I think it was just a specialization and something very specific you were doing, working with AI, whichever, you know, subdiscipline it was. But now the difference is that everybody cares about artificial intelligence, so AI has to start caring about them. And in that sense, I think that this is just the nascent sort of phase of how interdisciplinary these projects will be in the future.
I find it interesting that in my own profession, I teach, and it's not just AI. When I look at what I teach in city planning, when I started out teaching, I always looked to universities as the leaders. And I'm not being down on universities at all. They've made a great career for me. And over all of my years of teaching, I've actually now increasingly found that the leadership is coming from outside of universities and from practice. And if I ask my students what they would like, let's because the world functions in an interdisciplinary nature. Let's kind of do that. They say, no, we don't want to do that. We just want more tricks. We want more tricks to make us more marketable. So give us more of whatever it is, which is usually vertical and crossways. So let me, say, take about 30 seconds each. What would, from your perspectives, you offer up to this audience in terms of what's the takeaway? What's the one or two things you would want, kind of, again, this group, everyone on his or her own, to take away?
Well, so I will say we were very far away from the science fiction of the thinking of the application or a robot today. That's the first takeaway. So I think a lot of these concerns are premature. That's one thing. But second is soft skills. Yeah, if you think about your own development, it's always about ability to manage the even more complex project, because we all live in IT right now. Face it, whatever industry you are, whatever you do today, we are all in the same, we are in IT, right? So ability to manage that and connect the dots and work with the others will be even more important than ever.
Actually, quickly?
I think start a project, whether you are before you're going into a company or if you're in a big company, then actually if you start a project that touches on some of these points that are quite interesting, then that's the best way to learn about this stuff. And I think also to start small, but then aim to go big at some point.
I would just say, like, I would like AI to be a very inclusive project in a sense that I think it's not going to be harmful if it's democratized, if everybody's on board. So I would say less AI fear and more like positive interest, but also demanding that you are taken seriously. So I think that, the more people are interested, express their interest, and want to take part in the debate, the better it is for everyone.
We're all on the bus. We're all driving the bus, and it's a collective activity. Join me in thanking the panel. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.